Hello and welcome to Unfiltered at the Water Cooler. This is a video cast series from Kreneon. I am Melissa Evers and I am the head of ecosystem at Kreneon. And I am delighted to welcome David Trueba to our studio today to talk about Kreneon. David is one of our advisors. So let's get started by just letting you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you bet. Melissa, great to be with you today, and I'm really excited to be able to speak about Kreneon and what we're trying to accomplish here. So I've spent the last 25 years in chemicals and the water management business, most recently in Revive Environmental. And while I've led P&Ls in the water space, there's a couple of themes that have been pretty interesting to me. One of them was water is essential to everything we do as human beings, from infrastructure to devices that we use. And more importantly, in drought stricken, water starved climates, it's becoming increasingly impactful that climate change, regardless of cause, shows up in water scarcity, water overabundance in the case of flooding. And so, as a society, we're really having to do a rethink around how are we managing water as a community, both local and global. And so, for me, Kreneon, it's the pitch that I've been wanting to have for the last 10 years, which is trying to solve a really important challenge in water today, which is how to make water investable and to break some of the barriers down around what prevents water from being invested in as communities and as society. So really excited to be with you today, Melissa.
So, thank you so much. When you started looking at our approach to water infrastructure, was there a specific spark or insight from your vantage point that was like, this is the team, this is the moment, this is what I, would like to lean in on?
Well, I've known Mike Ewelling for a good 15 years. We worked at YABW together, and we were teaching entrepreneurship to high schoolers. But what was really cool about it was I got exposed in the Oregon community around people that want to make a difference and not just want to build good companies. And Mike's one of those. So as Mike introduced me to you, Melissa, and to Stan, it became really apparent we had a very strong group of accomplished leaders that had some unique background. Stan with his understanding of how to make trading successful, both on the tech side as well as the market side. Mike with his network and his ability to fundraise and then to build out ecosystems. And then Melissa with your Intel experience, truly understanding how to make a ecosystem with stakeholders involved was really exciting. And then what I can bring to the table is my experience in water, my connections, as well as how water value system works. And so as the other advisors that you'll be able to hear on this platform, I'm really excited to hear their story too, because all of us bring a little something unique. But what I'm convinced about in my prior life, PFAS was a challenging societal problem. But one of the things that I really took away from my experience in the PFAS world is that challenging complex water issues can't be solved with a single technology or a single skill set. It takes a community and it takes a different mindset of people. And that's really why I believe Kreneon has found its moment. I think we have the right people. We're thinking about water differently, and we're thinking about how to bring capital markets into the water system to really change the game, and something that people have been asking for a while but may not have known about it.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. You mentioned your history at Revive Environmental and your work with regard to PFAS destruction. From that perspective, looking at advanced water technologies, what's the single biggest bottleneck holding back our water infrastructure and environmental accounting? Doesn't even comprehend.
Well, water is so basic to society. Many of us that are even in the water space take it for granted. The bar is pretty high for people to accept new technology or new ways of doing things, especially when it comes to municipal water supply. And so whether it was my Revive experience or just my general experience in the water industry, water folks are slow to change unless there's a key catalyst that drives them to change quickly. If there's a security of supply issue for a company that water is essential for them, or a community where water is essential, That urgency is created by a sense of how do I deal with the problem now because it's urgent. The other thing is that people ask me at Revive all the time, what was my biggest competitor? My biggest competitor is people didn't know who we were and what we did. And so that's very common in the water industry where new ideas and new thoughts really need to have context. How does this relate? What have I seen work before? And how will this be different? And really being able to tell the story. So a lot of times, Melissa, in the water space, the enemy isn't the new thing. It's how can it relate to somebody and what's in it for me in terms of the stakeholder.
Yeah, that's been one of my observations so far in our journey is that the water ecosystem tends to, my perception, I could be wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong. It feels like it's a highly verticalized market that's both verticalized by geography, but also verticalized with regard to specific technologies and the affinities for those specific technologies. And so, when you think about Kreneon as a horizontal layer to enable capitalization and infrastructure build out, et cetera, there's, I think awareness is a big piece of the work ahead, but also an understanding of how this perception of verticalization is actually a falsehood, that there's a lot that connects and can be shared, whether that be specific types of technologies like Revives, or whether that be specific types of infrastructure or specific type of market mechanics, et cetera. There's a lot that can be gained by horizontalizing, what today seems like fairly vertical markets.
Look, water by nature, Melissa, is a local thing. You get your water out of your own tap at the house, the water tower down the street. And so people have been thinking about that. And as water industries evolved over the last 150 years, it started with what my water is here, where I'm at today. And that fragmentation is what you're describing, has been part of the water journey forever. Companies that break through and technologies that break through often find ways to break through those verticals, whether it's technology, geography, or context, and make connections across the platforms. And I'm really excited to see what Kreneon can do here as we begin to connect those dots across the water space.
Absolutely. So you've navigated some fairly massive regulatory landscapes and some shifts in those landscapes through your work with Revive, such as the EPA drinking water mandates and federal disposal guidance, et cetera. You built Revive and are now, continuing on with regard to your advising of that company. Our core thesis is that while policy frameworks set boundaries, market forces actually are what deliver the true staying power. So I'm curious, from your perspective and your depth of regulatory knowledge, why is turning water attributes into standardized, clear commodities the right economic mechanism, and versus just waiting on traditional regulatory movement or policy changes or charitable investments in Africa, et cetera?
Well, Melissa, I'll take a step back for a minute. And if we look at water in general, there are standards for quality and safety. After that, it's all very much direct to consumer, whether it's the individual water user, the B2B client interface. And because of the fragmentation we spoke about earlier, the standards are very much what my vendor's doing for me, regardless of what they might be doing for others in benchmarking. And one of the things that I believe Kreneon can do really well is break this fragmentation, non-visibility of water, whether it's the volumes created, consumed, the quality by type. There's no central database for water quality across the country. It is managed, rightly so, by local municipal outlets, states, and then the federal registry provides standards, but the execution implementation is usually done on a local level by design. The local level knows the locals, and so therefore it's managed there. Because of that overlaying framework, it is difficult to gain access to how much water is being consumed or used. Then you take on the fact that meters can be old, Infrastructure can be dated in terms of connectivity, and you get a real mask of what water activity is being done at a local, national, or even global level. And it makes it really difficult to invest in if there's a lack of transparency. And so, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, what I'm really excited about with Kreneon, but the fact that Kreneon's basic value proposition of many is to democratize water standards. What is clean water? If PFAS destruction companies are going to take impure, contaminated water and make it pure again, what quality standard is that? And can we have a framework around it? If we look at municipal water that's being created by desalination or atmospheric water capture through condensation, all of those new sources of water can have a standard to it. Then you can have volume, you can have water quality. And as you standardize that different type of water, then you can put a price on it. And that transparency with price and value and volume can help create a market that makes things investable. And then that barrier of transparency goes away. Yep. So that's what I'm really excited about Kreneon, is that our journey here is to democratize water in terms of transparency, and then help others be able to come in, capital markets, et cetera, to invest in things that may have been difficult before because that investment is murky. And let's face it, markets today, when they hear a murky data set, they get nervous. And then markets start to think about risks, and then they discount, and then they add extra costs. Very difficult to invest in. But if the water is clear and the business case for investment, right? If the business case has clarity, it becomes really easy. Then I wouldn't say easy, but it becomes a lot less murky to be able to create an investment case for water. And that's what I'm really excited about. Because let's face it, you take PFAS, you take microplastic, you take just water availability in the Colorado Basin. I was in Colorado last week. I have not seen the reservoirs that low in my lifetime. And that's just a simple geography in the West here. You look at globally, Austin, Texas, Corpus Christi, the Middle East, heck, even the United Kingdom in places has water scarcity problems because of quality. All of these can take investment in order to fix, but investment without clarity of what the case is makes it really challenging and expensive.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I'm most curious about as these markets mature is, to your point, right now there's no knowledge, no market knowledge of the price beneficiary addition associated with, okay, this is verified to not have any microplastics. This is verified not to have any PFAS in it. There's no mechanism by which the market has that assurance today, and we don't know what it's worth. And so as we begin to figure out, verified clean water that has verification that PFAS has been destroyed is actually worth a 10% per cubic liter premium, or whatever the case may be. I'm making those numbers up, but you can then begin to say, like, oh, in this market there's a huge premium for verified PFAS destruction, and therefore I'm going to go build this plant, go do this and harness that capability. Once you have knowledge of what the market demand is for that type of water quality, then it unlocks all kinds of investments. And so I'm really, really curious to see, and not only the layering of those different levels of water and quality, et cetera, but then also how does that differ by locality? Some places may care about that, some places may not. So it's just gonna be really fascinating.
Absolutely. And I think local is where the improvements are met, but global is where investments can be made. And the key is to link the local challenge with an investable platform with clarity, both in quality and in volume. And one of the things that we've talked about as a leadership team at Kreneon is the fact that independent verification is a really important factor to make clear, both for the consumer and the provider, what water is going to be traded. And so as we think about that, it's the quality that you mentioned before. What quality is it, the standard? And one of the cool aspects, I think, of Kreneon, as I've come to understand it, is that we're not creating a new system for quality. We're going to use the same volumes that locals use, whether it's cubic meters, liters, whatever. We're going to take the same standards at a local, state, and federal level for the United States for water quality as applicable. If it's a reclamation, we'll do reclamation in terms of what's required. We're going to take the existing framework of quality, but we're going to connect device attribution and verification to then make sure that there's an independent source of truth. And then we can make the volumes clear, that quality is now clear. And then we can truly trade water, whether it's on a physical basis or on an investment trade basis. And that independent verification is extremely important because those barriers we talked about earlier, vertical markets, technology markets, oh, well, their water isn't my water. If we use standards and we have independent verification, hey, then it becomes really easy to be able to talk water for water's sake. And that's really what the world needs. We need a way to be able to talk about water that really translates geographies, languages, and metric versus standard, for example. And I'm really excited that Kreneon can help establish that.
Yeah, me too. So I have a different tenor of a question for you. So you spoke
Okay.
a little bit about, Stan and Mike and my background and what we bring to Kreneon. I'm curious about you and your leadership philosophies. You've spoken frequently about your values of servant leadership and managing with deep intention, and your the teams that you've led through various startups. I'm wondering if you have any wisdom or guidance with regard to building organizations and building cultures that you might give to Mike and Stan, Randy, and I.
Sure. Well, so one of the authors that I follow wrote a book called Grit, and her name's Allison. She's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She talks about three different types of bricklayers. This is the parable of three bricklayers. The first bricklayer, dressed the same, has the shovel, the trowel, cement in front of them. When you ask him what he does, he says, I lay bricks. The second person, same outfit, same trowel, same cement in front of him. When you ask him, what does he do? I'm building a house. I'm building a building. Same job, different perspective. You ask the third bricklayer, what is he doing? He says, I'm building a house of God. So what's the difference between the three bricklayers? The first has a role, not a bad thing. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do, does it well. The second one has a career, a way for him to do things repeatedly and to do them well. The third person has a calling, aligned to a mission, a why, a broader sense of what they do and what they're trying to accomplish. When I've led organizations and built high performing teams, it's really important to start with Simon Sinek's why. Why are we doing this? What is going to be different? What's going to be the same? And then what do we need to start, stop, and continue? As an organization, what are our values? And then as we roll out work, tasks, roles, responsibilities, etc., always tying back to what are we trying to accomplish? And in high performing organizations, it's really easy to be distracted by the minutia of the day-to-day tasks. There's always going to be grunt work. You're still going to have to use the trowel. But when you have a higher mindset of the mission and how your role contributes to that, it's going to be a lot more leverage personally. You're going to get more engagement, and you're going to get the right level of connectivity between the roles and the responsibilities and what you're trying to accomplish as a team, as a company, as a society. So getting clear on the mission, aligning the roles and responsibilities to deliver that, and having a management mechanism to be able to eliminate all the chatter and to stay focused. Those are some of the advices that I've had over the last 15 years that have helped me as I've built organizations.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that I have also learned through years of managing large engineering organizations is if people are clear on their purpose and the vision and what the goal is, that allows for folks to understand how to improvise, because it never goes to plan, right? We're laying a brick on a brick on a brick on a brick. It just never goes to plan. And so when folks have a clear sense of the goal, what the purpose is, what are those boundary conditions, they are able to then be empowered to say like, oh, well, we can't go this way. This is not going to work. So, but I know where we're going. So let's figure out how we dynamically shift and are empowered to inform our, our management around like, hey, we thought we could go this way. It's not working. Like, we think we need to do this to achieve that higher purpose of that goal. And I think that's a really powerful framework. So I have one final question for you. So you have also talked about your leadership philosophy of leaving things better than you found them. And so if Kreneon executes perfectly on our roadmap over the next 3 to 5 years, how does the world look different? How does the global landscape look different, both for industrial users as well as the kind of the broader ecosystem in your mind, once Kreneon's in its full glory?
Well, Melissa, I'm an optimist with a pragmatist immune system. So let me give you a realistic moonshot. I'm going to go to space, but I'm going to be real in terms of how we get there and what wildly successful looks like. Shift, it's about shifting. The shift one is that water has a real price. We can understand it. We can trade it. There's no boundaries geographically. There might be boundaries from a logistics perspective, but we can solve that with the right investment. So it's not a compliance item. It's the observable, transparent market price. I think that's going to be key. Because right now, if I ask your former company, Intel Semiconductor Fab, versus a beverage company versus a municipal, there's wildly different values. But ultimately, the use case for water comes from the same source. There's got to be a way to align market price. Shift two, I think the MRV becomes a standard. When you have a standard trading instrument, meaning the producer and the buyer have a set price and they can trade on volume and quality, the transparency layer becomes the foundation for every future decision. Regulation, investment, insurance, business cases, growth phase, security of supply planning. So that really lowers the bar for risk and increases the investment potential and velocity. And I think third shift is going to be institutional capital enters water at scale. Today, I look at a number of different private equity firms who are looking for either here's my niche middle market, they do a pump system, they do valves or whatnot. How do I build out to get my fair share of the fragmentation? I think when we have capital entering at scale, investing in actual projects, those projects then carry institutional weight and transformational change in society. Yeah. That's where it really becomes fun. Because now when we lower the bar of the lack of transparency through clear dynamics of water volume, water quality, we democratize the infrastructure deployment throughout society. And Kreneon's the building ramp. They're going to be able to create the infrastructure that people have told us for the last 6 months, Melissa. You've heard these conversations. Yeah. Boy, what Kreneon's building, we need it as a society. So I'm really excited to be able to see 3 to 5 years from now that institutional capital really enters the market at scale and helps out communities that really need it, helps out businesses that can really transform society and be responsible with it. And then the X factor. We talk data centers, we talk scarce water in different places. What if there wasn't water scarcity? There was a scarcity of funds because we're really investing wisely. And so that competition creates investment, which creates business cases, which then allows entrepreneurs to come in. And because the water is now transparent, it opens up a flood of different transaction mechanisms to invest in water. So I'm really excited not only to see the capital, but also the capitalistic, how do we make things better and more efficient, become part of the journey.
Yeah, just like we saw with renewable energy technologies and scale and ramp, et cetera, et cetera. I completely agree. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I would be totally remiss if I didn't give a nod to your shirt. So as folks may know, I am a Longhorn, hook 'em horns, and David is an Aggie, and so we have we have fun together. I intentionally did not wear my burnt orange this morning, but I also intentionally did not wear maroon.
Good deal. I didn't put my Texas flag in the background, so.
Well, there you go. There you go. David, it was a delight to have you on Unfiltered at the Water Cooler. Thank you so much for your thoughts and reflections, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for pitching in to help us get this thing off the ground.
Excited to see where Kreneon lands. Melissa, great to have you with me on the program today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, everyone.